Okay, so on assignment 14 here, we're looking at decision trees. First one I got here is my housing decision tree. And what we're deciding and using this tree for is interpreting how the clusters were made in our previous assignment and getting a visual representation of the calculations and the processes that Orange went through to group up and cluster these. So we'll just go ahead. Basically just followed what you did on the video for the most part for this one. So we'll check out our tree here and zoom out. So we can see that cluster 2 holds the majority, holds the most values out of all the clusters. And the determining factor on that, like we talked about in the video, was the radial distance from the highway. And basically we can see here 224 out of 506 entries belong to C2. And from there, the first separation is the radial distance greater than 8, or is it less than or equal to 8? So we can see values that ended up belonging to C3 were all of those that were greater than 8 miles from the highway. So cluster 3, that is their single determining factor, houses that are greater than 8 miles from the highway. And then we go over here to C2, and we can see that, okay, well, houses that are less than or equal to 8 miles of the highway, there's 374 total of those values. 59.9 of them actually do belong to C2, but there is this remaining gap that do not belong to C2. And they go to the other clusters, which I think it looks like it's just cluster 1 here. So then it goes into the next deciding variable of how it's going to sort these houses, and that is the air pollution value here. So again, on the right side, we have air pollution greater than this 0.518, and on the left side, we have air pollution that is less than or equal to 0.518. So those air pollution that's greater than that number, 90% of those houses end up belonging in C1, and those that is less than that amount, 92.9%, end up belonging to C2. So it's pretty good. It weeds them out, gets the majority where they need to go. But from that point, it then goes into the third decision variable, which we'll talk about here and not go too crazy far down this tree, which is age of the house. So starting on the right side here, age, if it's less than or equal to 67, it's got a 50% chance of being in C1. If it's greater than 67, it has a 97% chance of being in C1. So it's greater than 67 years. It most likely is going to belong to that C1 cluster. And then over here, if it's less than or equal to 67, it's got a 50-50 shot of going to C1 or C2. And then if we look at C2 on this other side, for age, it actually uses a different measure, so 71.9. So if it's older than 71.9 years, it's got a 60% chance to belong in C2. If it's less than or equal to 71.9 years, it has a 99% chance of belonging to C2. So basically this tree is just showing us the process it goes through of sifting through the measurements and really the idea, a visual representation of the math, if you will, that it is using to decide these clusters. So, basically what it's telling us is, depending on the radial distance, if it's one way or another, it's going to tell you C3 or C2. And depending on that answer, then it goes into seeing how much air pollution is, further sifts them out there, and then goes into age and sorts them out more so from there.